The galaxy was vast, stretching beyond imagination, with stars and planets scattered like diamonds in the dark void. Among these worlds was one that had long since fallen into ruin, the planet of Zalara. Once a thriving civilization of advanced beings, the Zalara had been exiled to the farthest reaches of space, their kingdom destroyed in a war that they did not start. They were seen as a threat by those in power, feared for their strange abilities and their strength. But one Zalara, Princess Lyra, had survived. Abandoned by her people, left to die in the cold emptiness of space, she had somehow managed to survive. Captain Alden Reed, a man with a past full of battles and scars, had never planned on finding her. He had been on a simple mission to scout an abandoned world, searching for any signs of life or valuable resources. What he hadn't expected was to find a survivor. When Alden stumbled upon the ruins of a long-forgotten Zalara outpost, he thought it was just another ghost town, a relic of the past. But then he saw her. Lyra. She stood alone among the shattered walls, her skin pale but still glowing with a faint light. Her hair, silver like moonlight, cascaded down her back, and her eyes were a piercing green, filled with a sadness that spoke of years of solitude. Alden knew the stories. The Zalara had once ruled vast swaths of the galaxy, their empire stretching across many systems. But after a failed revolution, their people had been cast out. Lyra, the youngest daughter of the Zalara king, had been blamed for the uprising and exiled, thought to be dead. But here she was, alive, and her presence threatened to change everything. Without hesitation, Alden approached her. "You're alive," he said, his voice filled with awe and disbelief. Lyra didn't respond immediately. She only glanced at him, her face a mask of emotionless grace. "I was left behind," she said softly, her voice like a whisper carried on the wind. "Abandoned." Alden's heart softened as he saw the pain in her eyes. She had been cast, away like so much debris from a lost war. He couldn't leave her there, not like this. And so he made a choice. He took her aboard his ship, the Mercury, and set course for the human capital, hoping to find a place for her among the stars. As they traveled, Alden learned more about her. Lyra was not just any Zalara. She was royalty, the last surviving member of a once mighty family. Her people had fallen, betrayed by those they trusted, exiled and scattered. She had been the symbol of their hope, but that hope had been crushed. But despite all the loss, Lyra was not broken. There was a fire within her, a determination to find the truth behind her exile, to uncover what had really happened to her people. As they passed through the blackness of space, she began to trust Alden, sharing the painful stories of her childhood, her father's rule, and the tragic downfall of the Zalara Empire. Meanwhile, Alden couldn't shake the feeling that bringing her to the capital would not be as simple as he hoped. Humanity had a long history of conflict with the Zalara. The council would not look kindly on his bringing back an exiled princess, especially one whose people had been the cause of so much destruction. He would need to be careful. When they finally arrived at the human capital, Elysium, the bustling city gleamed with the power of human civilization. Tall spires reached up into the sky, and ships of all sizes flew overhead, carrying goods and people across the vast expanse of the known universe. But the moment Alden's ship touched down, he knew things were about to get complicated. The council had already received word of his return. They had been watching his every move, tracking his mission. They were not pleased. In the briefing room, the council's leaders stood before him, their faces stern, their voices cold. "Captain Reed," said High Counselor Jax, his voice sharp, "you've returned with an exiled alien, one whose people nearly destroyed us. What were you thinking?" Alden stood tall, trying to remain calm despite the pressure. "I was thinking that Lyra, Princess Lyra, isn't just any Zalara. She's been abandoned, and I believe she can help us. She deserves a chance." The room was silent for a moment. The council members exchanged looks, some skeptical, others angry. Finally, Councilor Talia spoke. "A chance? Captain Reed, you're asking us to welcome back a member of a race that tried to annihilate us. She is a threat." Lyra, standing beside Alden, spoke for the first time in the council chamber. Her voice was strong despite the fear in her heart. "I was exiled for a reason I don't understand. But I am not your enemy. I want peace, and I want justice for my people. If you give me the chance, I will prove that." Her words fell heavy, in the air. Some of the council members seemed to waver, but others were resolute. "We will not be swayed by her words," Councilor Talia snapped. "She will be executed for her crimes. Her very existence is a reminder of our greatest loss." Alden's heart sank as he realized the gravity of the situation. They wanted her dead. He had known it wouldn't be easy, but he hadn't anticipated such immediate resistance. He had no idea how to protect her from this council, from the very people he had once fought to protect. But fate had other plans. Just as the tension in the room reached its peak, alarms began to blare throughout the capital. Outside, the sky darkened as an enormous fleet of unknown ships appeared in orbit. The council froze, their faces pale as they realized that the planet was under attack. Alden looked at Lyra, his thoughts racing. This was no coincidence. Her return had set something in motion. The Zalara were not the only ones who had been watching. The doors to the council chamber burst open, and soldiers rushed in. "Sir, you need to come with us. The capital is under siege." Alden exchanged a glance with Lyra, who had a look of determination in her eyes. This wasn't just about saving her anymore. It was about survival. With no time to waste, Alden and Lyra rushed from the room, leaving the council behind, as the sky above Elysium filled with the ominous shadows of the unknown fleet. The alarms in the capital rang louder, shaking the walls of the council chamber as the distant sounds of explosions echoed from outside. The city, which had always felt like an unshakable symbol of human power, now seemed vulnerable, fragile. For a moment, the council members looked at each other in panic, their usual air of control shattered. Alden Reed knew that the situation had just taken a dangerous turn. He could feel the heat of the tension in the room. This was no longer just about protecting Lyra. It was about survival. The entire city was under threat, and it was clear that their enemies weren't interested in diplomacy. They wanted to destroy everything. "Captain Reed, what is happening?" Councilor Jax demanded, his voice low with anger. "Explain yourself." Alden stood firm, his eyes scanning the faces of the council. He didn't have all the answers, but he had one undeniable truth. The Zalara were coming, and they weren't alone. Lyra, who had stood quietly beside him, now spoke, her voice calm yet filled with determination. "They aren't here for me. They are here for all of us," Lyra said, her voice echoing in the tense silence of the room. "The fleet that has arrived, they are not my people. They are the ones who destroyed us. The Thalar." The name sent a ripple of confusion through the room. The Thalar were a race of ancient beings that few had ever heard of, and even fewer had seen. They were mysterious, rumored to be long extinct, and the stuff of legends. To hear Lyra speak their name with such certainty was chilling. "You're saying that the Thalar are alive?" Councilor Talia's voice trembled as she spoke. "But that's impossible. We've heard nothing of them for centuries." "They are not gone," Lyra replied, her eyes hardening. "They've been watching, waiting for the right moment, and now they've come to finish what they started." Alden stepped forward. "We need to act fast. If the Thalar have arrived, then this will not be a simple invasion. They've had centuries to prepare. The attack outside is only the beginning." The council was silent for a moment, as if they were all trying to come to terms with the gravity of the situation. They had never prepared for an enemy like this, an ancient race with the power to destroy entire civilizations. Now the question was whether they could survive it. "We cannot let her speak for us," Counselor Talia finally said, her voice trembling with fear and anger. "She's one of them, a Zalara. How can we trust anything she says?" Alden turned to face Talia, his eyes cold. "Lyra saved my life. She has nothing to do with the Thalar. She's a victim, just like the rest of us, and she wants to help. We have no choice but to trust her." But Talia wasn't convinced. "She should be executed for her crimes. The Zalara have betrayed us before. We cannot allow them back into our midst." Lyra stood tall, unshaken by the words that rang out against her. "I was betrayed by my people. I was abandoned to die. The Thalar did this, not the Zalara. If you execute me now, you will be making the same mistake my people made before." Alden saw the truth in her words. He knew that Lyra's presence in the capital was a powder keg, and the council's reaction would determine if they could move forward together or if they would fall into ruin. The council could not see past their own fear and history. Before anyone could respond, a soldier burst through the door, his face pale with panic. "Sir, the fleet is breaking through the city's outer defenses. They've activated their weapons. The capital will fall if we don't act immediately." The room erupted into chaos. The council members scrambled to issue orders, their usual composure replaced by panic. But Alden knew that the time for bureaucracy was over. The threat outside was real, and they needed to focus on survival. "Lyra, can you tell us anything about their capabilities?" Alden asked urgently. Lyra nodded, her eyes clouded with sorrow and fear. "The Thalar are not like any race you've encountered. They are ancient and powerful. They don't just conquer, they destroy everything in their path. And they have technology far beyond anything you can imagine." Alden turned to the council, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We need to unite, or we will all die here. The Thalar won't care who you are or where you come from. If we don't put our differences aside, we won't survive." Some of the council members hesitated, but the grim reality of the situation weighed heavily on them. The city was under siege, and their survival depended on quick action. "We must prepare our defenses," Counselor Jax finally said, his voice steady. "Captain Reed, you will lead the defense forces. Lyra, stay close to us. We'll need all the information we can get." As they all rushed out of the council chamber to face the threat outside, Alden couldn't help but think that they were all already too late. The Thalar were not just invaders, they were a force that had been manipulating events from the shadows for centuries. Now, they were ready to bring their wrath down upon humanity. In the chaos of the war room, Alden caught a glimpse of Lyra. Her face, usually so calm and collected, was now filled with fear. But there was also something else, determination. She wasn't going to let her people's past mistakes be repeated. She was determined to stop the Thalar, not just for humanity, but for her own broken people as well. But time was running out. "Captain," one of the officers said, "the Thalar are preparing to deploy ground forces. The city will be overrun if we don't act fast." Alden's heart raced. They didn't have much time. He turned to Lyra. "Are you sure we can stop them?" Lyra looked at him, her eyes fierce. "We can stop them, but we'll need to work together. We must trust each other now, or we'll be destroyed." With the fate of the capital hanging in the balance, Alden and Lyra set out to lead the defense. But they knew that their greatest challenge was not just the Thalar. They would have to face the fear and distrust of their own people as well. It would be a battle for survival, not just of their city, but of their very future. The sun was setting over the capital, its light fading as the dark shadows of the approaching invasion grew closer. Alden stood on the balcony of the war room, looking out at the sprawling city below. The once gleaming buildings, now lined with smoke and the sounds of distant explosions, felt eerily quiet. The air was thick with tension. The Thalar fleet had broken through the defenses, their ships now hovering ominously above the city, casting long shadows over the capital. Alden could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The Thalar were relentless, and time was running out. "We need to make a plan and fast," Alden muttered to himself. His mind raced, trying to figure out how they could fight back against a force so powerful, so ancient. He knew they couldn't do it alone. Lyra entered the room, her face calm but serious. She had changed into a more practical outfit, her long, silver hair tied back tightly. Despite everything, she seemed focused, her mind already on the battle ahead. "They've breached the outer walls," Alden said, turning to her. "The Thalar won't stop until they've wiped us out. Do you have any ideas on how to stop them?" Lyra looked out at the horizon, where the enemy ships loomed like dark giants in the sky. "The Thalar are not like us," she said, her voice steady. "They don't fight for land or power. They fight for destruction. But they do have weaknesses. We just need to find them." Alden felt a flicker of hope. If anyone knew the Thalar, it was Lyra. She had grown up among her people, and though they had betrayed her, she still understood their tactics, their technology, and their mindset. She was their only chance. "We'll need to work together," Alden said, turning to face the officers gathered in the war room. "The Thalar are too powerful for us to fight alone. We need an alliance, not just with our own people, but with the Zalara." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. There was a lot of distrust in the room, especially when it came to the Zalara. They had been the enemy, after all, the ones who had nearly destroyed humanity years ago. Now, Alden was suggesting they join forces with the very people who had once fought against them. It was a hard pill to swallow. But Alden didn't have time for hesitation. "We have no choice. If we don't unite, we'll all die here. We need to put aside our differences and work together." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes meeting those of the officers. "I know my people," she said, her voice unwavering. "The Zalara are not the threat. The Thalar are the true enemy. If you want to win, you need my people's help." For a long moment, there was silence. The officers looked to each other, unsure of how to proceed. Finally, Counselor Jack spoke. "If we're going to work with the Zalara, we need assurances. I need to know we can trust you, Princess," he said, his voice still tinged with distrust. "Your people have a history of betrayal." Lyra didn't flinch. "I know what my people did. But they've been manipulated, just as you've been. The Thalar are the ones pulling the strings. If you don't believe me, then you'll see for yourselves. The Thalar are not interested in negotiating. They'll destroy everything, and they'll start with this city." Alden watched as the officers exchanged looks once more. They were still uncertain, but the urgency of the situation was starting to sink in. The Thalar were not the type of enemy they could fight with old grudges or fear. They needed allies, even if those allies came from an unlikely source. "I'll prepare the Zalara," Alden said, turning to Lyra. "We'll meet with your people. If they're willing to help, we can stand a chance." Lyra nodded. "I'll contact them. But be warned, my people are not united. There are factions among them, some who want peace and others who want revenge. It will not be easy to rally them." "Then we'll do it the hard way," Alden replied. "We don't have time for anything else." The next few hours were a blur of activity. Alden and Lyra worked together, reaching out to the Zalara forces scattered across the galaxy. While the human fleet scrambled to prepare defenses, Lyra's message was sent across the stars, calling for her people to join the fight. Alden knew it was a risk. There were many who would never trust Lyra, and even fewer who would trust humans. But if they didn't join forces, the city would fall. By nightfall, the first group of Zalara ships arrived. They weren't as many as Alden had hoped, but they were skilled, and their ships were advanced. Lyra's people had been out of the fight for years, but their technology was still among the most powerful in the galaxy. And with Lyra's guidance, they would be a force to be reckoned with. Alden stood at the command center, watching as the Zalara ships landed on the outskirts of the capital. The humans were wary, unsure of what would happen next. Lyra stood beside him, her face unreadable. "It's happening," she said softly. "They're here. But this is only the beginning." Alden nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. This was the start of something new, a fragile alliance between two races that had been enemies for so long. But they had to succeed. The Thal-Ar wouldn't stop until they had destroyed everything. "We have to make this work," Alden said. "No matter what happens, we fight together. We don't let the past control our future." Lyra looked at him, her green eyes intense. "Agreed. This is our last chance. If we fail, there will be nothing left." The battle was coming, and it would be like no other. The Thal-Ar had come to end everything. But Alden and Lyra knew they couldn't let that happen. They had to fight, not just for their own survival, but for the future of their people. And in that moment, they understood what it meant to be allies, united against a common enemy. The air was thick with smoke as the city of Elysium braced for the full force of the Thal-Ar assault. The streets were filled with soldiers preparing for battle, their faces grim and determined. Alden stood at the front lines, his eyes scanning the horizon where the dark shadows of the Thal-Ar fleet hovered ominously. The battle was coming, and the alliance between the humans and the Zalara was their only hope. As he watched the soldiers ready themselves, Alden couldn't help but think back to everything that had led them here. When he first brought Lyra back to the capital, he had no idea just how much her return would change everything. It had started with a simple act of kindness, rescuing a woman lost in the ruins of a forgotten world. But now, with the Thal-Ar threatening to destroy everything, that simple act of kindness had turned into the last hope for peace. Lyra, standing beside him, seemed calm as always, but Alden knew her better now. Beneath her composed exterior, there was fear. Fear for her people, for humanity, and for everything that was at stake. "Are you ready?" Alden asked, turning to her. Lyra met his gaze, her green eyes steady. "I've always been ready. But it's not just about fighting anymore. We need to understand the Thal-Ar if we want to defeat them. They are not just an enemy. They are a force of destruction." Alden nodded. He had seen it firsthand. The Thal-Ar didn't just fight for power. They fought to tear down civilizations, to erase entire species. The war they were about to face was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. As the two of them turned to walk towards the command center, a communication officer rushed up to them, his face pale. "Captain Reed, Princess Lyra, we have a message. It's from the Thal-Ar fleet." Alden's heart skipped a beat. "What do they want?" The officer hesitated, then spoke in a quiet voice. "They want to speak with Princess Lyra. They say, it's a matter of family." Lyra's expression hardened, and Alden could see a flicker of something behind her eyes. He had learned enough to know that the Zalara royal family was not without its secrets, and Lyra's past was one of them. "Put it through," Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. The officer nodded and activated the communication link. A hologram flickered to life before them, showing the face of a man, a tall figure with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes. His skin was pale, his hair dark, and his expression unreadable. "Lyra," the man said, his voice smooth but filled with a quiet anger. "It's been a long time." Lyra stiffened. "Zarek, I should have known." The man's lips curled into a slight, mocking smile. "You always were clever, sister, but not clever enough to avoid the consequences of your actions. You've betrayed your people and now you'll pay the price." Alden watched as Lyra's eyes narrowed, her posture stiffening. He could feel the tension between them, the deep history that lay just beneath the surface. Zarek, Lyra's brother, was the one who had taken control of the Zalara forces after the fall of their empire, and now he was leading the charge against humanity. "You're the one who betrayed us, Zarek," Lyra replied, her voice quiet but filled with conviction. "You've sided with the Thalar, the very force that destroyed our people. I will not stand with you." Zarek's expression darkened. "You have no choice. The Thalar will not be stopped. They will destroy humanity, and if you're wise, you'll join us before it's too late." Lyra's jaw clenched, and Alden could see the pain in her eyes. This wasn't just about politics. It was personal. Zarek was her brother, and yet, here he was, threatening everything she had worked to rebuild. "Then you've made your choice," Lyra said, her voice hardening. "I will not stand with you, Zarek. Not now, not ever." Zarek's eyes flashed with anger, but his tone remained cold. "You think you can stop us? You, a broken princess and a group of human soldiers? You're nothing but pawns in a game. You don't understand. The Thalar will reign supreme, and when they do, we will all be ashes." The hologram flickered, and the transmission ended, leaving an eerie silence in the room. Alden could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Zarek's words echoed in his mind. "You're nothing but pawns." It was clear that the Thalar were playing a much larger game, and the stakes were higher than they had ever imagined. Lyra stood still for a moment, her eyes distant. Alden could see the struggle in her, the pain of facing her brother, the man she once trusted, now an enemy. He wanted to say something, to comfort her. But he knew this was something only she could face. "I never wanted this," Lyra said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But he's right about one thing. The Thalar will stop at nothing. They've already destroyed us once. And now, they're here to finish the job." Alden placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll stop them. Together." Lyra turned to face him, her green eyes filled with a fierce determination. "We don't have a choice now. We have to stop them. For my people. For yours." The battle was no longer just about surviving. It was about defeating an enemy that had manipulated everything from the shadows. The Thalar had played both the Zalara and humanity against each other, using their fears, their pride, and their history to fuel the flames of war. As Alden looked at Lyra, he knew that the path ahead would not be easy. Her brother Zarek had chosen his side, and there was no turning back now. But Alden also knew that Lyra was no longer just a princess. She was a leader, a symbol of hope, and she would stop at nothing to protect those she loved. The battle for Elysium was just beginning, and the outcome would depend on how far they were willing to go to fight back against the Thalar, and how much they were willing to sacrifice to ensure that the galaxy had a future. The city shook with the force of explosions as the Thalar's ground forces stormed the streets. The once bustling capital was now a battlefield, its buildings shattered, its streets filled with the sounds of gunfire and distant shouts. Human and Zalara soldiers fought side by side, their courage and determination the only things keeping the enemy at bay. Alden stood at the front lines, leading the charge alongside Lyra. The two of them had fought together before, but this was different. The enemy they faced now wasn't like any other. The Thalar weren't just another species bent on conquest. They were ancient, powerful, and merciless. Their weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Lyra's eyes flicked back to the battlefield, her expression focused. "We can't keep them at bay forever," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We need to find their leader. If we don't stop them at the source, they'll overwhelm us." Alden nodded. The Thalar were relentless, their forces seemingly endless. Their technology was far beyond anything the humans or Zalara had, and their tactics were brutal. But they weren't invincible, not if Lyra's knowledge of her people's enemies was correct. "We'll find them," Alden said. "We just need to hold them off long enough." But Lyra's gaze was distant, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. She wasn't just worried about the battle. They both knew that the Thalar were here for something far bigger than just Elysium. They were after something ancient, something powerful, and Lyra, with her understanding of the Thalar's history, knew that their true goal wasn't just to conquer, they wanted to destroy. "They've been manipulating us," Lyra said, her voice quiet but filled with conviction. "The Thalar have been pulling the strings for centuries, setting us against each other. First the Zalara, then humanity. Now, they want to finish what they started." Alden turned to her, his brow furrowed. "What are you saying?" Lyra's eyes met his, her face grave. "The Thalar aren't just another enemy. They're an ancient race that feeds on chaos and destruction. They don't want just territory. They want to wipe out entire civilizations, every trace of life. And they've been using us to do it." Alden's mind raced as the weight of her words sank in. The Thalar weren't simply trying to conquer, they were trying to erase everything. All the lives lost, all the wars fought. It was all part of a much larger plan. "We have to stop them," Alden said, his voice hardening with determination. "If we don't, they'll keep doing this. To us, to the Zalara, to everyone." Lyra nodded, her gaze fierce. "We'll stop them. But we need to get to their leader, Zarek. He's the key to everything. He's the one who's been working with them. If we can defeat him, we can break the Thalar's hold on us." Alden's heart sank as he thought of Zarek, Lyra's brother. He had once been a member of the royal family, a leader among the Zalara. Now, he was the one leading the charge for the Thalar. He had betrayed his people, betrayed his sister, and now he was the greatest threat they faced. They had to find him. Before it was too late, hours passed, and the battle raged on. The streets of Elysium were a maze of destruction. Alden and Lyra fought their way through the chaos, pushing forward with every step. The Thalar forces were everywhere, their weapons tearing through buildings and streets, their soldiers mercilessly sweeping through the city. But Alden and Lyra couldn't stop. They couldn't afford to. Zarek was somewhere out there, and he was the key to ending this nightmare. As they made their way deeper into the heart of the city, they stumbled upon something unexpected. A massive underground bunker, hidden beneath the rubble of what had once been a thriving district. The entrance was guarded by Thalar soldiers, their alien faces cold and impassive as they stood watch over the facility. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice tight. "This is where they're hiding." Alden nodded. The underground bunker was the Thalar's command center, the place where their forces were being directed from. If they could take this place, they could cripple the enemy's operations, but getting inside wouldn't be easy. The bunker was heavily guarded, and the soldiers surrounding it were unlike any they had faced before. They were larger, stronger, and more vicious than anything the human forces had encountered. But Alden wasn't backing down, not now. "Let's move," Alden said, signaling to the Zalara soldiers who had joined them. "We take them by surprise, fast and hard." With a nod, the small group of rebels charged forward, weapons raised. The Thalar soldiers opened fire, but Alden and Lyra were faster. They ducked behind cover, returning fire with deadly accuracy. The sounds of battle filled the air as the two sides clashed. It didn't take long before they made their way inside the bunker. The interior was dark, the air thick with the scent of machinery and sweat. The walls were lined with advanced technology, devices, and monitors Alden couldn't even begin to understand. But there, in the center of it all, stood Zarek. His face was cold, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and determination. He was no longer the brother Lyra had known. He had become something else, something twisted by his alliance with the Thalar. "You've come for me, Lyra?" Zarek's voice echoed through the room. "I thought you would be smarter than this. You're on the wrong side." Lyra's eyes narrowed, her hands tightening around the weapon at her side. "I'm on the side of life, Zarek. The side that doesn't want to see everything burn." Zarek laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You think you can stop me? Stop the Thalar? You've lost, sister. There's no going back." The tension in the room was palpable. Alden could feel the weight of the moment, the knowledge that everything hinged on what happened next. This wasn't just about defeating Zarek. It was about stopping the Thalar once and for all. And in that moment, Alden realized that the battle wasn't just for Elysium. It was for the future of every living being in the galaxy. The room was silent except for the hum of machines and the heavy breathing of the soldiers. Alden stood with his back against the cold metal walls of the bunker, his eyes fixed on Zarek, who stood across from him. Lyra, her expression set in, a mask of resolve, was beside him. The tension between the siblings was palpable, each one holding tightly to their own vision of the future. Zarek's face was a mixture of anger and contempt as he stared at his sister. His voice, once full of warmth, was now icy and hard. "You think you can stop me? You think you can stop the Thalar? They are ancient, powerful, and they've been using us all as pawns in their game for centuries." Lyra's green eyes never wavered. "You're wrong, Zarek. The Thalar don't care about us. They don't care about anything except their own destruction. You've made a deal with the wrong enemy. You were never meant to be their puppet." Zarek's lips curled into a bitter smile. "And you were meant to do what? Lead a broken people? You've always been weak, Lyra. You've always been idealistic, believing that there's a way to fix everything. There isn't. Not anymore. You're too late." Alden could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This wasn't just about defeating Zarek or the Thalar anymore. It was about something much deeper, about stopping the cycle of destruction and finding a way forward, not just for the Zalara, but for everyone. "We still have time," Alden said, his voice steady. "We don't have to fight like this. We can stop this war. We can make things right, Zarek." Zarek's eyes flashed with fury. "It's too late for that. The Thalar will destroy everything, and there's nothing you can do to stop them." But Lyra stepped forward, her gaze never leaving her brother's face. "You're wrong, Zarek. I'm not like you. I don't want this destruction. I want peace, and I'm going to stop you no matter what it takes." Alden watched the exchange, realizing that the battle wasn't just about weapons or strength. It was about conviction. Lyra had always believed in something greater than war. She had always wanted to heal the broken past, not let it define the future. Zarek, on the other hand, had allowed his anger and resentment to consume him. He had chosen revenge over healing. The silence in the room was broken as Zarek's hand reached for a device on his belt, a small, glowing orb that hummed with dark energy. The Thalar had been preparing something terrible, and it was clear that Zarek intended to activate it now. The weapon, whatever it was, could destroy Elysium, and possibly much more. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "No, Zarek, don't do this!" But Zarek was already activating the device. The ground beneath them shook as a massive energy pulse shot from the orb, crashing against the walls of the bunker. The air around them crackled with energy as the power of the Thalar weapon filled the room. "This is the end, Lyra," Zarek said, his voice cold and final. "You had your chance to join me. Now you'll pay the price for your failure." But Alden wasn't going to let this happen. He knew the only way to stop this destruction was to stop Zarek. In a flash, he lunged forward, tackling Zarek to the ground. The orb slipped from his grasp, sending a burst of light across the room. The weapon was destabilizing. If they didn't act quickly, it could destroy them all. Alden scrambled to his feet, grabbing the device. He turned to Lyra. "We have to shut it down, now!" Lyra moved fast, her hands shaking as she reached for the controls on the device. Zarek, struggling to get up, tried to stop her, but Alden held him back, pushing him against the wall with all his strength. "You've lost, Zarek," Alden said, his voice firm. "The Thalar don't care about you. They never did." Lyra's hands worked quickly, her mind racing as she decoded the sequence of commands. The orb pulsed again, its energy growing stronger. She could feel the countdown inside her head, the seconds slipping away faster than she could process. "You're just like him, aren't you?" Zarek spat, his eyes filled with fury. "You'll never understand. You'll never see what I see, the power that we could have had, together, the destruction we could have wrought." Lyra's fingers paused, but her resolve remained unshaken. "I understand perfectly, Zarek. You chose revenge. I chose peace. There's still time to make things right." She slammed her hand down on the final key, and the orb's energy suddenly stopped. The pulse of light vanished. The room fell into an eerie silence, the weight of the moment crashing down on them all. Zarek looked at her, his face a mask of disbelief. For the first time, Alden saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. The weapon had been disarmed, but the damage had already been done. The war had taken so much from them, and no matter what happened next, there would be no going back. Lyra stepped back, her expression filled with sadness. It didn't have to end this way. Zarek didn't respond. Instead, he slowly lowered his head, his shoulders slumping in. Defeat. The man who had once been her brother was gone. All that was left was the enemy, the broken remnants of a fallen people. Alden turned to Lyra, his heart heavy. "It's over. We've stopped it." Lyra nodded slowly, but there was no joy in her expression. She had won, yes, but the cost had been high. The Thalar were still out there, and there was still much to rebuild. "But it's not over yet," Lyra said quietly. "We've stopped Zarek and the Thalar for now, but the galaxy is broken. We'll need to heal it piece by piece." Alden looked around at the destruction that still filled the city. The war was far from over, but at least now they had a chance. Together they could rebuild, not just the city of Elysium, but the future itself. And as they walked away from the bunker, Lyra's steps were lighter than they had been before. She had faced her past, and in doing so had forged a new future, one built on hope, not revenge. It wasn't going to be easy, but they would face whatever came next, together. The battle had been won, but the war for the galaxy's future had only just begun.